In a previous lesson, we looked at how Bootstrap provides a more elegant styling to the default HTML5 form elements. However, Bootstrap also provides classes for extending HTML5 form elements in new and interesting ways using input groups. So essentially, an input group allows you to add text, buttons, or button groups on either side of a text input element. So you should use these whenever it makes the function of a given form element more obvious, whenever it clarifies the usage of the control. You can also abuse these and make things a little less obvious, and they give some examples in their documentation that, in my opinion, kind of would force the user to think and be a little confused. So you can abuse this power that I'm going to show you here in a moment. So let's go ahead and get started by adding a new page to our project. We already have done this a billion times already. We're going to call this one input group classes.html, and I'm going to grab our template and we're going to do some interesting stuff with Bootstrap. Okay, so here again, let me just grab that. Let me do that. Let me do this XS, and then I'm going to create a bunch of rows, and then we'll stick stuff in there like we've been doing. Okay, great. So first up, let me create a very simple version of an input group, just kind of show you how it works. So in this particular case, let's go create a div, and we're going to use the class equals input group. That's the important part. And or one of two important parts. Then we're going to actually add our input control. So we'll do type equals text, and then we will just use the class equals what? Form control, right? And we can even add a placeholder here. That's fine. We'll just use something like email address, and we can leave it at that. Now, what I'm going to do is actually add a span tag to this collection that's wrapped with this div tag. So span class equals input group add-on. You see that we've added that class now. And here I can put any kind of text that I want. I'm just going to put like an @ symbol. That should indicate maybe email address or something. I could put a $sign here. I could put whatever I want to connote as the purpose for this particular field, even text, but it's probably better to keep it small, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So I think that's all I need. Let's go ahead and take a look at this now. All right, and so you can see that we've added on this little @ symbol, and it's a very compact way to give a visual indication of what the purpose of this is. And this might be a little bit of an abuse, so Bob at whatever, but I think that you'll find there are some interesting uses for this. So let me paste in a second example, and we'll put it in the row below it. And so I might add the span tag with the input group add-on after the input control if I know that every account should start with the same @example.com. So in other words, I'm telling the user, use your email address that we provided you. This could be at a university or some organization, and all we really need is the first portion of your email address, not the @ and then the second and first level domains. And so we would get something that looks a little bit more like that. So I could just say bob@example.com, and then it would be very explanatory what was expected in that space. I wouldn't have to use any other additional text there. So here's an example straight from the documentation, and I'll just paste it in. And this is another interesting usage where they provide, for example, a vanity URL. So say, for example, I wanted to create my own web page, and it allows me to create a new account and then create a URL, a custom URL that my account will automatically log into or that my company will go to. So I would point all my friends and all my users to example.com/users/devu in that particular case. All right, so again, very succinct way of indicating to the end user what the intent of that particular field is. Let me give you one more good example from their documentation, one that I see myself using most frequently, and that is this one where we're actually requiring a dollar amount from the user. And so we indicate that by giving a span tag before and after the text input control. And so I know now I'm looking for $34.00 in this particular case. Like you might expect, you can also change the sizes of your input groups. So let me grab our original input group that we created on camera, and I'll paste it in twice to some new cells that I've added below. And in this first case, what I'll do is go right next to the div class equals input group, and I will use the input group LG to create a larger version of this. And I will use the opposite, the input group SM, to create a smaller version of it. All right, so here's the default size, the large size, and the small size. And then the final thing, and where things start to get a little bit murky as far as I'm concerned, is that you don't have to just use these span tags like I've been using. There's a lot of additional options, especially around buttons. Now, here's where I have an issue. I don't like whenever you force the user to think. And let me just show you what I mean by that. This is not a very wild example, and some of them will get pretty crazy. This one actually is not so bad. It's a search button, and we'll pick it apart in a moment. So here I might search for, you know, what's the meaning of a CSS framework, and hit go to do a search. And that looks like a logical usage for the button as part of the input group. However, if you look at their documentation, let me pull it up here real quick. All right, so they provide some examples of things like checkboxes and radio add-ons. So for example, you might check none of the previous apply, so go ahead and type in your answer here. Not sure, I guess the radio button would be kind of the same scenario. None of the previous radio buttons apply, so I'm gonna select this and then type in my own text. The add-on buttons, look here, let's just use this input groups. Do I love it or hate it? This to me is a little bit nebulous as to what the user is supposed to do next. And the same would be true for, I type something here and then I hit an action from a menu and then choose that. So while these are cool, I would recommend that you not always use that. And if you do, they suggest that you add some accessibility features using the ARIA label, ARIA described by, and things of that nature in order to explain the purpose of that given input control. But there's a book that I read a long time ago. It was actually recommended to me when I created the first version of LearnVisualStudio.net way back in 2002. And it was a book called Don't Make Me Think. And by providing non-standard versions of controls, you're forcing the user to think and maybe even potentially feel dumb about their decisions. So I would probably recommend that you stay away from some of these usages of the input group because they can confuse more than they can help. But whenever you can use them to clarify your intent, a good example would be the dollars and cents. Another good example would be the search box, putting those right next to each other. There's no way you can deny that those two are connected together. They make a lot of sense. And so avoid them whenever you have unique input scenarios when just plain old regular form elements from HTML5 will work. So again, don't make me think too hard as your end user. All right. So that's input groups. Pretty cool feature, but use them sparingly. And we'll continue on the next video. See you there.